shooting a live episode, and I have a special guest. And I want to tell you guys the reason why I brought this guy on. So, okay, which is it's kind of a fan moment right now because I read his book. Okay, I read his book. I went through his book, and we're gonna be just full disclaimer. I didn't get to finish it, but I read halfway. Okay, but I want to say this, guys. When I mean that there's something that I want you guys. We're gonna be talking about the book, and I'm gonna be actually grilling him and asking him questions about this book. And if you're an entrepreneur watching this, then this is the podcast for you. So, Adam, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, brother, please, the floor is yours.
Oh man, first off, Emmanuel, hey, I'm so excited to be on this show. Let me tell you, I saw your content. I've been through the rabbit hole. Anybody that is not subscribed, that's not been like digesting all this information, you have rock star guests all day long. And I was just super impressed. I think over 300 episodes on YouTube. Hey, man, do what you got to do, but stay plugged into this content. So a little about myself. So Adam Torres, I'm the co-founder of Mission Matters. We're a media company and we do a whole lot we'll talk about later, but it's been a lot of fun. We built an agency from the ground up, media company, publishing, PR, you name it, we do it.
Interesting. I love it. I love it. I love it. So, you know what's interesting is your journey with entrepreneurship, and we're gonna dive into your book here, and
Yeah.
I'm very, very fascinated. I'm very, very curious about, I want to kind of ask this question because no one has been able to give me a straight answer on this. Do you believe entrepreneurs are born?
When I think about the word entrepreneur, I have a trouble with it. Like, cause this is
Okay.
the way I look at it. So think about like, pre-industrial revolution, we were all, at least in the United States, we were all farmers. What's a farmer? A farmer is an entrepreneur. It's called, you have to make money. You have to eat, right? You have to provide for your family, however you feel you can best do it. So if we take the word entrepreneur out of this, and if we just say like, what's the best thing for an individual to do? Maybe some people want to work for themselves. Maybe some people don't. So I don't really think that it's a born or not situation. I myself am an accidental entrepreneur. So if we want to be literal to the question, I wasn't an entrepreneur. I was an accident into the entrepreneur. Was I born into entrepreneurship? I'm going to go with no. So
Okay.
somebody can learn because I learned. And if I could do it, I feel like anybody could do it.
Okay. Now I want to see. Let me see if I can find this. There's a chapter from your book here where you start talking about basically when you were an airbrush artist, right? You were
Yeah.
selling basically the T-shirts, and I was fast. How old were you when you were doing that?
Man, this is crazy. I thought I was 21, but
Uh
and I
huh.
thought I was an adult. I'm an only child, so I thought I was, but I was actually started when I was in sixth grade.
Sixth grade. In sixth
Yeah,
grade. So
yeah,
so you there's a quote from there's a part from your book where you said I made quite a bit of money. So in
yeah.
sixth grade, how much money would you say ballpark did you make?
I was making money in the thousands. So
What year
when I
was this?
said that, well, I sold a lot of shirts. Like if you think about it, like shirts were anyway, even back then they were pretty expensive because it was airbrush. So it was art. Like people would
Okay.
bring me, I know a big popular one back then. So I'm from Detroit. So hip hop music, big influence. So Wu-Tang Clan had just come out and they just had their logo and everybody was looking at them. Man, I sold so many Wu-Tang shirts.
Interesting. So sixth grade, so you're selling now. Now I wanna go ahead and share this with you, and I want to kind of get your opinion on this. And this is I don't know, are you familiar with Alex Hormozy?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Come
I
on.
mean,
The
I mean, I
$100
mean, I
million.
mean,
I have his book right there on my
oh,
table.
do you know about the because he's got the launch for the next book coming August 19th. I don't know if you're following as
I
far as
didn't know about that, but I know his name and I see his content often.
he's got another book coming. So I want to kind of go ahead and play this book here where he was talking play this part here where he was kind of sharing his opinion as far as are entrepreneurs born or entrepreneurs
Hmm.
made. And I'm very, very curious what your take on this is.
I had been rewarded for following the directions, which is why it was so much harder.
Let's see if I can
So
start this up.
do you think sex?
I like how it
Reject
just
the
went.
concept of being a born entrepreneur. The natural born entrepreneurs are just typically people who got reinforced for doing entrepreneurial type behaviors earlier. I was a very
Mhm.
security driven person for most of my life. I just had jobs and then I went to college and then I got a white collar job that had prestige around it. The most terrifying thing in the entire world for me was quitting that job. It took me 6 months to quit a job and I was 22 or 23 and I had $50,000 saved up and I was petrified. But it was because I had never been rewarded for that. So it was such a huge change in behavior for me because I'd been rewarded over and over and over again for doing what I was told. So I think it's
So I want to kind of like, so we don't get too carried
Yeah,
away.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, is he was talking about the rewarding perspective as to people who become entrepreneurs were never rewarded for, being the book reader. They were never
Mm.
rewarded for being that person that was like, always like, following, how everything worked. And I'm just very, very curious as far as in your perspective, because in sixth grade, you're literally, you're 6 years old, right?
Yeah.
You,
I
uh,
was no, I
it's,
was in sixth grade. Sixth
you're in
grade.
sixth grade. So in sixth grade, you're selling in the thousands. Okay, in
Yeah.
sixth grade. Now, to me, that kind of comes to the perspective of that's something that was in your nature.
Yeah. I think that'd be overshooting, honestly.
Okay.
For me, like that'd be overshooting. For me, it was a simple progression. I was just an artist, and that was the style. And I was like, and I had my father, so he was that was his business, not t-shirts, but he painted cars, like high end sports cars, things like that. Again, I'm from Detroit, so big car culture. And based off of that, I couldn't like paint cars at that age, but I could airbrush and I could start playing around with it. And then, you just have friends that have other things that they're doing and they're like, hey, let's, I want to buy one of those shirts. Like those are cool. And then it grew from there. But was I rewarded for it? Probably not. Like it was just like nobody was really thinking at that level. It was just a kid in his, painting and other stuff. So in retrospect, like I don't think it ever even really occurred to me. I'll tell you, it didn't even, and I talk about this in the book, but it didn't even occur to me that I was an entrepreneur when I was an entrepreneur and I left corporate America. So it was more, to me, it was more of a calling than anything, which I know that may not resonate to everybody, but I was something I felt drawn to do, but I still didn't even really understand the concept of like entrepreneurship as it is today.
So if you can, I'm very curious if you can share your experience with the when you basically how because you mentioned corporate America, and I don't
Yeah.
want to give up too much in your book because I want you to
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
share this. I don't
Oh,
want to
you
go
can give
for
it up. I'm
no,
in.
no, no. I don't mind sharing, but I want you to to
Yeah.
kind of give me a little bit more of your experience as far as walk us through the journey of
Yeah.
when you started in corporate America, from corporate America to what you're doing now in the media
Yeah.
space. And I love what you're doing in media space and also in the book publishing space.
Yeah.
That story.
Yeah. So first off, I just always did well in corporate America. So I was always top 1% of companies that I worked for typically. And I mean, I was in finance for a long time, and really, I was just rewarded up the corporate ladder. And I know that there was a point when I had kind of like a decision to make. And the decision was essentially, did I want to, continue working for the company long term, or did I want to explore other things? Now, the way that I went into entrepreneurship, I do not recommend to other people. And this isn't a do as I say, not as I do type conversation. That's not what it is. What it is more so is I didn't necessarily have a clear plan. All that I knew is I just had this feeling that what I was doing wasn't going to get me to my calling or where I was supposed to be. I didn't really feel like I was really helping enough people. I had my practice. I was managing a little under $200 million. So I wasn't a $1 billion guy, but I was doing okay. And I had my practice, I had my set clients, and I could kind of see the next 10 to 20 years of my life, possibly, if I was on that road. And that kind of scared me a little. I'm like, I didn't see any potential for any hockey stick or anything else, like any like huge growth. I saw kind of the consistency of what my life would be. And it kind of scared me a little. And I kind of thought about it, like if I was ever going to make the leap and, explore, like now would be the time. I didn't have any family, no kids. I mean, like that, no kids, no wife, nothing like that. So it was just the time for me. And so I, left a, really safe, well-paying corporate America job. And I didn't have a plan necessarily in what was next, other than I was going to start my own firm.
Interesting. So now I'm very curious because is this detailing your experience with Lincoln?
Say
When
that
you
one more
worked
time.
is this detailing your experience with Lincoln Financial?
No, so I wasn't with Lincoln. I was with at first I started when I was 16. I worked with Raymond James and Associates in their IRA department. I worked my way up, went to college. When I left there, I was in insurance for a bit. Then I was also at the Vanguard Group. Then I worked at my last position would have been at Charles Schwab, where I worked my way up through the ranks there. So by all means, I was a corporate guy. Think about it: Series 7, 6, 63, CFP, Ames. Like I had all the credentials, all the background, and I've been working in that field since I was 16 at that point.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. You mentioned selling insurance. So
Yeah.
what a known fact is, I used to sell insurance, right?
Yeah.
And I read the part in your book where I'm not, like I said, I don't want to give
American
away.
Income. That was the company. Okay.
AIM,
American Income.
AIM,
Yep. Yeah.
American Income. Like, that's the company you work with.
Yep.
I remember that. So I was reading the part where you were like, I think I believe it was Lincoln before you
Yeah.
guys went into Prosperity Group, and you were like, okay, you know what? I was doing the medical side. I was helping with a 401k, and then they just walked in your office and was like, hey, you got to drop all of this, and now you got to start, selling life and selling insurance. You're like, I've got the business side. We're like, wait, no, that the money
Yeah.
is not in the business side. The money's in insurance. So,
Yeah.
that part was about division, right? You're
Yeah.
like division.
You
So,
did read that part, and this is part of kind of the setup for the book. That was Elliot Callan, the other co-author on his story. So you read it right. It was Lincoln 100%. And by the way, for everybody watching, two different co-authors in this one. And I'm gonna, Emmanuel, you gotta have you asked a question. I'm gonna connect you and Elliot. Now you gotta have him on the show. That's one for him, man. And what's funny is that when you read the book, in my opinion, there's two different voices, because I'm the accidental entrepreneur. When you said, are entrepreneurs born or are they, made? Elliot was born for sure. He was born a serial entrepreneur. That's him. I was more on the made side. So in the book, you will juxtapose both, in my opinion.
I was mixing both, but the it's fascinating with the Elliot connection, because I know you said he was a guest on
Yep.
on your show, right? And you guys
Yeah.
have done 6,000 episodes, right?
I've done almost 6,000 episodes. Elliot, he does have another show as well. And he's done, I think he's in the hundreds for sure.
Jeez. Okay. First, I'm gonna. So what was that? What was that bromance came in? And you guys like, you know what? We got to write a book together. We gotta co-author a book together.
So
What was
one of the
that?
things, yeah. So one of the things that I feel that when you're blessed, like the next thing is to think about like how to be a blessing. So the fact that Mission Matters has grown, the fact that when you say I've done almost 6,000 interviews, to me, I mean, okay, that might sound good from one angle. And whenever I hear that stat, I'm like, wow, 6,000 people wanted to talk to me. That's amazing. Like, just period, like would come on the show and lend their time, lend their expertise, lend their knowledge. Like I'm truly humbled. And I love the fact that people are willing to collaborate. And so for myself and Elliot, as we kind of, grew, we'd actually published some other volumes, not a full book like this, but we do these anthology series where Mission Matters, my company, brings together business leaders from all around, and we publish them in a book. So anywhere between 15 to 30 leaders in a book. And then we put out the stories, we publish them, we promote them as a publishing company. So Elliot had taken part in two of our other business leaders projects. And he just, he was always in our community. He was always just kind of curious. And we just kind of always had these longer conversations. And we always kind of not took opposite sides in a bad way, but it was more so like we had legitimate differing opinions. And we thought about it and we're like, wow, what if other people could listen in to hear this and to see different sides of the story? And if they could see that there's different ways to be an entrepreneur, you don't have to be this one way or this Mark Zuckerberg or this or that, or there's not just one way to do this thing. And because we were actually, which is it's kind of contrary to, I feel like, how most co-authors come together, but because we were so opposite almost, and because we had such different backgrounds and all these other things, we were like, that's a book. I don't know if I've ever seen a book where there's on entrepreneurship, where there's two different opinions in the same book about entrepreneurship, all aimed at getting to that end goal, which is the greater cause and the mission, and being a mission-based entrepreneur. Which also, just a quick plug for the book, proceeds much of the proceeds are going to his organization, A Brighter Day Foundation, which is really meant to help with teens that are suffering through depression and other like very serious issues. So just a quick plug for that one. But that was the other part of the mission. Like there had to be a book. To do a book is great. I'm not against that. We're a publisher, right? We do books. But if we could tie that to his mission, which is something I believe bigger, which is A Brighter Day Foundation, then that becomes like something that it's like, that's some great energy out into the universe, in my opinion.
I love it. So I want to, with the, it's very interesting to kind of see the story, and then now that I'm reading the books, I'm kind of having to understand, like, whose story is which story, whose story.
Yeah.
But now
It's,
I don't want to get it too personal, but I believe the personal life does play a role in our overall business life, right?
yeah.
So take for instance, I'll give you the scenario. So when we're building a team in the insurance side, which if you're familiar with insurance, we got 800
Yep.
people. Damn, guys. All right. I like how the fact they're here to see you, man. When
Yes,
I do it
sir.
live, they're only 200 people. They're here to see you. No, so and I want to talk a little bit about the relationship side of things, because this is a very fascinating thing for me.
Hmm.
Is when I used to get in agents, I would get, anybody, you got the single guy, you got the guy, you got the married, and then I would notice something, that the people who had families were committed, right? The people who were
Hmm.
families, they would fight and they would keep fighting, right? But people who had
Yeah.
relationships were like just in the dating scene, they're like, I'm not really,
Yeah.
and I'm very fascinated to get your opinion on this. How much do you think having a personal life, having I don't know, a partner, or how
Yeah.
much do you think that plays a role into your actual business?
Yeah. Well, for me, I think it's a very important thing. I mean, so I was raised Christian Catholic, so I'm a believer, and I feel that union between man and woman, or
Mm-hmm.
between your partner, like, I just think it's an important thing, and it's an important part of life. I think we become more whole. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
part of my upbringing. It's something that I 100% subscribe to. So that's me. I'm not married yet. I'm still, I hope to be married, and I don't take this as personal, by the way, as a personal question, because I think it's very relevant to business. I hope to
Okay.
be married and to have kids and things like that. I'm not there yet, but for me in my life, like, I do use that piece of understanding and trying to become a better person, a better man, a better entrepreneur, to be able to get to that point in my life. So that's a big, I think, important part. And for those that I can say that I've seen that, have those relationships and that work on that, not easy, but it appears to be, from the outside looking in, like, extremely rewarding.
Okay, now I'm curious. This is just gonna be a lighthearted. How is I assume you're a busy man, but I assume you go out on dates, right?
Yeah.
How is the
Yeah.
dating life in California? I'm just
It's
fascinated.
not, man. I don't think I'm busy, man. I don't. I'm not at that point. I like to tell people I'm in the media world. There's not glamour in what I do. Like, I'm like I work, man. You think you get to 6,000 interviews in, like, the last 5 years or 6 years, by not working? Um, LA is a very interesting place. I'm from the Midwest, so my
Okay.
my ideals are still probably more Midwest than LA. I tend to be on the more conservative side, like the open relationship, this, that, whatever. Like, I believe in marriage. I believe in having kids. I believe in the family environment. Like, I'm a big fan of that, versus maybe some of the, and I don't want to stereotype all of California or all of LA or all the people in there, but the looser lifestyle is just really not my thing.
Okay. No, that's interesting. That's why I was very fascinated, because I always wanted to get like I used to be in a dating scene in the East Coast,
Yeah.
East Coast. Never really tried anything in the West Coast. So I was very fascinated what your opinion was going to be. But
I would say
now,
it's hard, by the way. It's hard. It can be harder to connect in a place like this or any other, kind of like metropolis or something, where people are always going in and out,
yeah.
because you're not around other family units very often. If you're in LA proper, like I'm at, like if you're in Hollywood or in these areas, so you're not in the same type of, like, I'd say, wavelength of where
Hmm.
people, because if you think about it, like being in a marriage or having children, that's a sacrifice on
Yeah.
yourself, right? Your time, your ideals, your business, possibly. It just depends on where you're at in life, right?
Hmm.
So in order to make that sacrifice, it's a very selfless act at the end of the day, because of how much work and effort it does take to make something work. So if you're in an environment where maybe that's not something that's like, it's almost counterculture maybe in certain areas. So if that's
Hmm.
something that you're looking for, then probably you don't want to be here as much when you get, let's say, past your 20s. If you're in
Interesting.
your 30s, if you're slowing down, if you're in this other phase of your life, a lot of people leave. Like, they'll go south, they'll go to, like, Orange County, or they'll go north, or they'll go to, let's just say, the suburbs, or more familial friendly, or family friendly environments.
Interesting. Okay. Now, what kind of the dating scene is a very interesting thing, especially for the business world. But
Yeah.
I'm very curious about your take on this, because a lot of people, I believe, get into business not because they believe their product should exist, but I believe they get into business because they're trying to make extra money, right?
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. I had one of the podcast guests. I haven't heard the episode because when I recorded it, I was on the road, so I travel a lot, and I did
Mhm.
not realize that my mic was not connected
Mm.
to connected. So all the feedback I was getting was basically all terrible audio. What I mean,
Oh
terrible. I
man,
mean,
I'm sorry to hear that. We all been there. Oh,
you know what I mean, right? It's just
I did a
terrible.
live interview. I'm going to pick on myself briefly. I did a live interview the other day. I was like on set at this convention, all this other stuff. It's all on the YouTube channel. I was like, I overslept on something. And so the
Mm.
setup was quick and we just did it quick and we didn't do what we normally do. I recorded that whole day, all these interviews, the mic's upside down. You can see the shirt. The audio came through, but if you're looking closely at the video, the sure part is upside down.
Oh man,
It happens, man. This is hard. Anybody watching this that thinks it's easy, you do it.
no, it's not. It's not, guys. Because the thing is, we're going live right now, and I think so. I'm getting my yard. I'm getting my yard done, which is funny. I'm getting my yard done, and I think the guy's here, and usually my girlfriend is home, so she kind of, if I'm doing live, she takes care of that, so she's not here. But now I can't get off the stream because we're going live. So it's kind of like, you have one of those moments where things
It's
happen.
the
You're like,
best, man. It's the best.
you got to keep going. You got to keep
We're
going.
so blessed.
Absolutely. So I want to go ahead and share this video with you, and I want to kind of get this video in,
Yeah.
and let me make sure that I don't start this from a
Mhm.
position where okay, perfect. That's where it is. So I'm going to share the screen. Let's make sure that we have good audio and good feedback here. Okay, let's
Okay.
see. Perfect. Okay. All right. So this is Gary Vee, and I want to get your take on this.
Income, and
Okay.
I want to know what kind of trends do you see?
When you say passive income, do you mean what do you mean?
I mean, not having to work all day long. I want to be on a beach in Mexico instead of being in an office.
That was the wrong person to ask.
Are you being serious right now?
Yes,
I already knew he was going to bite his head off.
The quickest way to not be on a beach in Mexico is to think that passive income exists. I think the reason so many scumbuckets
Why did he
make
ask
so
Gary
much
Vee
money
that?
is because you're buying stupid fucking courses over and over, thinking there's some fucking magic formula for passive income. Passive income looks like this. You take money that you can afford to go to zero, and you put them in the two places that have historically created passive income. Public markets that you don't care if it goes up and down and you just wait to the end, or real estate. And you hope that your real estate area doesn't get crushed. Everything else almost doesn't exist.
Okay. Now
Yeah.
I want to kind of let's kind of come back to you for some comment in there. Well, when you see that, what's the first thing? What do you think?
Why'd that guy ask Gary Vee that question? Does he not know who was on stage to ask the ultimate grinder that invented the third shift? Well, he didn't invent it. It was in the auto industry, but he's the one that I would say popularized it from anybody that's not familiar with the factories or anything like that. The work after the work. But over and above that, though, to answer your question, but I couldn't help it. I was like, why do you ask Gary Vee that question? But I do agree with, and this is kind of my financial advisor hat. So the first thing is the concept of real estate and markets. What he said, that's textbook. I agree with that completely. On the other side of things, though, and I think where he's on stage, so it's kind of hard for him to, and he probably had in that format a lot of other questions that were asked him. So he has to be quick with his content. And so he's just a little different. But if he was kind of like really going like a level deeper and having a conversation one-on-one, he would have probably answered it and said that there's variations and shades of passive income. It's not black and white. So for example, if you have, and I'm not going to say YouTube's easy, so I'm not going to say YouTube or any particular things, but let's say that you have a particular piece of intellectual property that you created, a book, or it could be something else. And now let's say that you have a team that you've partnered up with and they're helping you to sell it. And they're the ones that have the infrastructure for it. You've already created the product. You're on their platform. They're doing the selling. They're getting a rev share from it. That's passive. Like you're done working. You could be on the beach doing something after that. I have friends that have done that. Like, I mean, it's not like, so it just depends. Like there's different, it's just not black and white. He's answering it black and white in all fairness. I mean, I'm not negating Gary V. Come on. Like that guy's forgotten more about business than I'll probably ever know. But I just mean that there's shades to it. That's all.
So what are those shades? Because I think there is especially in the online community,
Yeah.
there's shades of people believing in the myth, and I think it's a myth of the passive income.
Yeah.
What are the shades?
I think that the first thought is that you're going to get something for nothing without adding value. Like, so it all stems at value. So even in the scenario that I just gave you, like you would have had to have created a piece of IP that people actually want. So that book or whatever that you may have had, or that you may have put out, that may have taken you 5 years to write, or that may be your life story, that may be other things, who knows, right? And that may provide you with a certain level of income that may or may not suffice for your living habits. So then you have to think about it. So that's one shade that's totally off. Now, where in Mexico, and using that scenario, is the guy going to live? Well, if he's making, let's say $1,000 or $2,000 a month, and based off of book sales and doing no work or whatever else it is, then and he can suffice on that income, great. Then maybe that's a shade. Now, let's say he wants to be a little bit higher up on the pyramid. He's like, I can't live on a couple grand a month. Like this isn't selling, like, not making me a millionaire or whatever his particular goals are. Well, maybe now he has to hit the road and has to start doing speaking engagements, right? That's work. That's not passive. Now you have to be active in promoting that book. So it's more, and so now he might be, getting, $2,000 or $3,000 a speaking engagement. So that's another level. That's another shade. So now maybe the guy's up to, let's say, $50,000 or $60,000 a year in income. And maybe he's working a little bit, like maybe he's only on a day or two a week because he doesn't get booked that much for speaking engagements. And so maybe that's part of it. And maybe he has a publicist or something else. And so now his expenses are going up a little bit more. And then all you're doing is every, let's say, layer or level of revenue in my particular example is going to add more complexity, which adds more expense, which adds more work to make it possibly to where you can't be as passive on it. Like, let's say the next step is he wants this to be a top selling book. Well, guess what? If you want to bank, $20,000, $30,000 a speech, then you're going to have to be on the road a lot of years, because you're going to have to do a lot of lower paying speeches to build that name up to get to where somebody's going to want to hand you over that check. So it's really a matter of how you're going to add value. That's kind of where you start, and then you work backwards, and how passive you want to be. Other than what Gary said, by the way, real estate and all of those things, like that's true. But outside of that, this is specifically to the online world. How passive you want to be is probably going to limit your growth unless you get, you find some particular niche that may work for a while. But at some point, like, there's going to be work involved.
Interesting. So, which is fascinating you saying that, because if I'm understanding, the way you explain it, the dynamics is, okay, work my ass off, I build something, and then after building it, then then I can resell it. Like, for instance, you work to write a song, the song becomes famous, and then now you're getting basically the what they call royalties. Right, you get royalties from that. You build a real estate property and then you're renting it. There's always that initial investment that is huge upfront capital, but then it pays you residual income. And I think that's more of like the word is residual income as opposed to passive income, right? Because I don't think passive income is real.
Yeah. I like your example, by the way, of music, and that's probably a much shorter winded way of saying it. I'll give you a quick one. I don't know if this is verified, but I heard an interview. Fat Joe said, from that Lean Back song, he said he makes, I think, like 50 to 75,000 passive on royalties per year from that. He's not living on that. And he didn't say that part. This is how I'm correlating the conversation. But that's 50 or 70,000. He makes millions of dollars because he stays in the media. He grinds, he does shows, and he's doing interviews, and he's creating other content. So now that IP is worth more, and it'll continue to stay in front of it. But it's not like he's not, if he wanted to, it could be passive. He just stops and, I'm gonna click that 50,000. I know it's an extreme example, but that's how you get to different levels, is continuing to push it.
Interesting, interesting. Now there's there's the part in your book because you had your own financial company, right?
Yeah.
Which anyone who knows in the financial industry, especially if you've built up enough book of business, you're making a good enough income,
Yeah.
right? And what made you say, you know what, I'm going to go from the financial services space
Mm.
and now I'm going to go into the media space?
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't, and this is again not disclaimer. I don't recommend people do this.
Okay.
So I have, it's been a thing that I've done in my life multiple times, and that's when everything is going really well. But I just don't feel that like calling. Like I just don't feel like I'm in flow. I
Mm-hmm.
tend to stop everything.
Mm,
So I'll give you a quick example that's not in the book. When I was, before when I left the Vanguard group to go to Schwab, at that point I was pretty much semi-retired. Speaking of passive income, so at that point, I mean, my expenses because of my real estate investments and other things. Not saying I had this huge portfolio. All I did was I decreased my expenses to the point to where they were like nothing. I moved into a fourplex. So I lived in one of the units. I rented out the rest. And so I decreased my expenses so much that I think I had $400 a month of actual expense that wasn't covered by passive income. So I could just sit on my butt and all I needed to have was $400 a month. And that would cover my bills and any little like incidentals I had. So getting back to my example, actually, that all matches everything I said. So that was truly passive. But I just didn't feel like I was in flow. I didn't know. I was like, is this it? I just didn't feel like I was in the right calling. So I quit my job. I quit everything. And I just, I just kind of sat there and I read a lot and I just read a lot and I read a lot. And I was on this path that it's going to sound really funny, but I go to the gym, I hang out with who I say this very affectionately, my retirees. And they're, in their 70s. And I would just, I'd be on the exercise bike next to them. They'd be on the exercise bike and we'd be talking, hanging out. And this is like at, 11 o'clock. And they tell me like, hey, Adam, shouldn't you like be going to work or doing something? I'm like, no, what are we doing today, guys? And they kind of shook me up a little bit. Like they're like, man, you're in your 20s. Like you have so much life ahead of you. Like, do you know what we would do if we could go back in time and this and that? So they kind of got on me. And so I started thinking and I started praying really hard on it. And that kind of got me back into the workforce and going to, then I joined Schwab. And just to kind of speed up the story. So at this point, I had, let's say 5 or 6 years later after that particular point. And I was doing well. I kept getting promotion after promotion. I was in Century City, California. My office was in one of the best zip codes right there, Avenue of the Stars. Doesn't really get better in Southern California. And I was at that point again. And I just had that feeling like, is this my calling? Is this what's next? And so I left that. And I didn't know what was next, but I did have, I started my own firm and that's what I thought was the calling. I thought that was the variation. And at that same time, I launched a book. And when I say that it's a calling or like, I believe in God and that these things kind of happen and manifest. The book just did uncommonly well. Like it was just a little self-published book. It was like nothing that I could now we're a professional publishing company and right, this is my business, but it didn't start out that way. It was a regular self-published book. And I put that out and I started getting like these like signs, like I'm going on like speaking engagements. I'm going on these like tours. I've been as far away as China on a speaking tour that somebody found me cold on LinkedIn. Like what? Like, how does all that happen? So I just kept getting all these different like signs. And then next step was, and this led me into the actual business side of it, was that I had people seeing what I was doing promoting the book start asking me, could I help them do the same? And I was like, nope, I manage money. I don't know anything about books. I just did this for myself. It's very difficult. It's hard. Then I'm like, all right, so no, I told first person no. Next person asked me, I tell them no. By the time I got to the third or fourth person, I was like, all right, God, I hear you. You're telling me that I'm supposed to figure this out. So I go back and I pray on it and I'm thinking about it. And I look at all of the different models that are out there to publish books. And I come up with one of my childhood favorites, which is Chicken Soup for the Soul. And I see what Jack Canfield and Deepak Chopra and a lot of my heroes had done when they came together for a collaboration. So my first book that I published as a company with the other co-founder, Chirag Sagar, we brought together 15 authors in Beverly Hills. We put together an anthology, which for anybody listening, that's just a group of authors that come together for one single book. We put out the book, and then more things just started snowballing. So then we did a second book, then we did a third book, then we did the show. And I'm humbled to say that we had over 20,000 people apply to come on the show last year. So it just kept spiraling and just kept on snowballing, I should say. And it was kind of like I was pulled into it more so than I made a choice. Obviously we made a choice, but it was just that magnet or that pull that kept dragging me closer and closer, I believe, to my calling, which is helping others get their mission out and amplifying their stories.
Interesting. Now, you mentioned something which is very fascinating to me, which was, you said when things tend to go well, for some reason, you kind of have this necessity. I don't know. You know what they say? There's like, entrepreneurs don't suffer from I don't think we suffer from a fear of failure. I think we suffer from a fear of success.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the thing for you, because I've been at a point in which I made the most money in my life, but for some reason I'm like, then you start to feel wrong. You're like, what is going on here, right? Because you're so used to getting rejected, you're so used to getting into failure. It's kind of like it's like, I want to use like a different dynamic here, where you imagine a kid who's born with a silver spoon, that's always used to being, given everything, and then all of a sudden, boom, you reject them. Then it's like, whoa, this is completely different. They're completely thrown aback. They get pushed off. And from my experience with failures and stuff and rejection has kind of been, I always tell people, like, my grades from when I was like kindergarten to I don't know, I would say high school or something, was like, there was a thing where I had the worst grades. Legit. I did. Yeah. So when I had the best grades, my father, even my own dad, could not believe it. He's like, you cheated. Yeah. He goes, how in God's name, for the past how many years you've had terrible grades, and all of a sudden now you have good grades? Well, what happened? Yeah. So I'm very fascinated. Do you think that's the case in which you have the fear of success?
Yeah. For me, by the way, I know that a lot of individuals go through what you're going through or have gone through. And I know that that's a thing. So I'm not negating it. And I'm not like that is true. That is a thing. For me, it's slightly different. So, I mean, I come from just really humble beginnings. I mean, growing up in Detroit in the 80s, that was a war zone. The country was a different place. Detroit now is a beautiful place. It's a lot of thriving entrepreneurs. There's a great scene. But I mean, when I was growing up, it was a very different situation. So just the fact that I'm alive is just this blessing to that. I'm just like always trying to figure out, like, what can I do more with? Like, I survived. A lot of my friends didn't. So just based off of that, I'm always thinking, like, so for me, when I had success as a financial advisor, it was a very selfish success. I had my clients, I had my base. Even when I had real estate, that was a very selfish success. I wasn't making what I believe I wasn't giving back enough. And so the way I always looked at it for me was, I always felt that, my mother's gift, she was 40 years. She was a social worker more before she retired. Shout out, Mom. Always give Mom a shout out. But her approach and the way that she gave, and I believe that she was kind of, and they're not saying one way is right or wrong, by the way, there's just different approaches. So she, I believe, was more like a bottom-up giver. In her way, she helped people really one-on-one, whether it was through counseling or otherwise. She worked with, she was actually the second employee at Covenant House, Michigan. I helped move them in. I still remember my teenage years. And her way of helping people was one-on-one conversations. Like, that was it. Like making that connection. And then she'd help people. And then in turn, they go out into the world. And she was working with some of the most at-risk youth in the country. For the United States. And so she did that and affected a lot of lives. When as I've gone through my path, and now to say I knew this at this time, by the way, would be incorrect. This is with a lot of self-reflection and figuring out kind of where I feel my calling is and taking those signs from God and heading in that direction. Or what I feel those signs are. But my approach and what I felt was that my work was to kind of build on hers. And so as I learned about these different platforms and these different ways of spreading messages, I couldn't think that like, did I want to just be this? And I'm not this now, but and I'm not saying that it's negative for people to be this, but do I just want to be this rich guy in Beverly Hills, like, which I'm not rich. I just mean that was my thought process. Do I just want to be this rich guy in Beverly Hills that lives, you know, a block away from Rodeo Drive, has an expensive watch and a nice car and this and that? Like, is that it? Like, because if that's it, then I can just stay on this path and check that box done. Because the numbers, I mean, again, I was a financial advisor, it adds up. You just keep on doing that over and over. You execute, not saying it's easy and not downing anybody who that's their calling. I'm not judging anybody, but for me, if that was it, then I don't feel that, like, I don't think God saved me and that I made it through what I made it through for that to be it, like, to me. So when I stopped these things, and when I was and again, in retrospect, whether it was real estate, like, that was just very selfish. Like, for me, like, how was I helping other people? Okay, you're providing housing, you're doing other things, and I could, okay, write a check, but am I really, really making use of my gift that I feel I've been given? I don't think so. When I was a financial advisor, I already had a book of, 400 clients working one-on-one. Okay, I could train some advisors, they could help other people, but am I still making use of my gift? Like, I interviewed the other day, David Meltzer, and his goal, and I always had these people in my peripheral. His goal is to help 1 billion people. So when you hear somebody else saying about wanting to do good and help 1 billion people, like, I never thought like I couldn't do that. I always thought, oh, I'm supposed to be helping 1 billion people. Like, I'm helping 400 people right now. That's a little shy of 1 billion. I don't know the plan. I don't know what's next, but I think I'm in the wrong path. So I need to stop and figure out what the right path is, because I think it's the Covey guy that mentioned this. Like, if you're on the, climbing that ladder, but it's on the wrong wall, you can keep on climbing and climbing. But, if you're on the wrong wall, you're not going to hit where you feel you're supposed to be. And I felt that I've been on that wrong ladder multiple times, but I didn't really know what the next rung was. So I just kind of got off the ladder, and I just kind of, sat in a position and just waited and tried to figure out what that next wall was to put my ladder on.
Interesting. Now, so I'm still kind of stuck on, which is very interesting what you said, but I'm still kind of stuck on the fact that you got a cold DM from someone on LinkedIn, and then off the cold DM, you said, I'm gonna go fly to China.
Yeah.
So what was that? How'd you get that much trust to go to just cold DM, boom, go to China?
Well, I mean, in all reality, if it had just been anybody, I'd say I may not have. But I mean, I had my credentials are pretty high in finance at that time. I'm not licensed anymore. I don't do any, just for disclosure for everybody. But the company was Moody's Analytics. It's a huge financial company, and they're a powerhouse. And they wanted me to go speak to some of the largest Chinese firms in financial management, and they were going to fill up halls of hundreds of people. So there was no risk there.
Interesting. Yeah. Fascinating there.
And again, but getting back to, like, how does that happen from a book or from this or that? Like, that's ridiculous. I think it's just a testament to me that anybody can do this. If you have a message and you want to get it out there, I don't care if it's a book, a podcast, a blog, whatever social media, Facebook Live, whatever you're doing, like, get your message out there. Like, people want to hear it.
Interesting. So, okay, let's talk about a book. For the longest, I've been thinking about writing a book, and I don't know, where do you start when it even comes to writing a book? Because I think writing a book is important because one, people get to read and see your message and almost live in your story. Where do you start if you want to write a book?
So my response is probably going to be different than you're expecting. The first thing that I realize as I've been a publisher is that there's a lot of people that want to write books that don't actually want to write books. They want the benefit of having a book. So what you have to kind of do your own, introspection on and think about is, like, why do you want to do the book? Like, is it for marketing? Is it for branding? Is it for thought leadership? Is it to share your story? Is it for, like, so all of those things, they come into play. And then if you kind of go through that self-reflection and decide, you know what, I do want to write a book, like this does make sense for me, then the next step is to really think about, like, do you want to work through a professional publisher, or do you want to, and there's a lot of different models there, by the way, or do you want to self-publish, and do you want to just put it together yourself and kind of see what happens. My personal journey, I just put the first book together myself and just see what happens. And that was my journey. And in retrospect, would I have done it one way versus another? I would just do it, period, whatever you were comfortable with. And myself, I was comfortable with that. And a lot of the things I'm mentioning, they all came out of that unprofessionally published, first published book that I did. So all of these things sprouted from that. And I actually leave that book up on Amazon as let's just say as amateurly published as it looks, but I leave it up there not because I can't republish it. I leave it up there as a testament to the fact that anybody can do it. So because I'm a huge fan of publishing books. So now let's say that you now decide you're going to go one route versus the other. Obviously, that's going to take you a lot of different specific ways, which we probably don't want to get into here, but we can if you want to just ask the questions. But the next thing to speed it up is the content. Like, you have to figure out what kind of content that you're going to that you want to present, that you feel, in my opinion, there's an audience for. Is this just an exercise in getting your ideas out there? If it is, okay. Or is this a part of your business where you feel you may have an audience that wants to hear your message? Two different paths in terms of how the book gets created, in terms of how much budget you put towards it, in terms of how much time you put towards it. Next thing is, you want to really think about, am I going to use a ghostwriter or am I not going to use a ghostwriter? For those that are maybe unaccustomed to that, or don't exactly know how that works, lots of different processes. But the way I like to think of it is, think about, a president of the United States leaves office. They come out with a book a couple months later. They didn't have time to write that book like I did for anybody. So ghostwriters are okay. It's okay to use ghostwriters. They're not making things up. What they're doing is they're helping to get your stories and your message formatted professionally so that it's digestible in an entertaining book if they're doing their job right. So think of it just like a movie. There's a script writer and there's somebody that does the writing, and then there's the actors. So in this case, you're kind of almost like the actor that's playing out the story. Can you do both? Yes. Should everybody do both? No. If you're not a natural writer, hire a ghostwriter. Like that's the thing to do. And then the next piece of it is really just the marketing and getting it out, which again, that's a whole nother discussion, but that's kind of like the layout in terms of mind frame and getting to the steps of the decisions you need to make in terms of actually getting a book completed.
Interesting. Okay. So basically, if when it comes time to publish the book or to write the book, I'll be like, hey, Adam, listen, it's your boy. Let's go ahead and have a conversation here. So,
for sure. Come on.
Absolutely. So I kind of want to dive into the next topic. And the next topic I want to talk about is something which is very dear to me, because a lot of people ask me, how are you able to make so much progress with a busy schedule? And I always tell them, is like, I have a very religious morning routine. Yeah. Right. And I want you to and then there's a video that I want to go ahead and share with you guys here. And I want to go ahead and get your take. I want to go ahead and get your take as usual on this video. And it's by Alex here.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what your routine is? Can you tell me the millionaire routine, the billionaire routine, whatever? What I'm going to tell you is going to blow you away, because what everyone expects is that they have to add things to what they're currently doing. You look at your morning and think, oh, whatever he's doing, I'm going to add that into what I'm currently doing. Yeah. And the reality is, most of the people who are further ahead of you are just not doing things that you are doing. And so you need to look at the things they are not spending time on that you are wasting your time on. And so that means not necessarily doing your cold plunges, your orange glasses and the finger toe shoes and the affirmations in the morning and staring yourself in the mirror and doing your pump-up speech. Instead, drink your cup of coffee, get to work, and realize that the work is the thing that's going to move forward. And sometimes the doing needs doing. Can you tell?
Okay, so this is so when you see that, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I'm a systems person. So I'll give you an example. So I'll give you two quick examples. So I don't leave the house without a book in my hand. So the way that I make sure I don't leave the house without a book in my hand is I put it next to my keys. I don't have to think about it. Like, and I'm going to hand out at least 1 to 2 books every day with just people walking around in my day-to-day life. Like, that's my goal. I believe so much in the book and the mission that I want more people to have it. So that's part of it. When you think about like our show, so Mission Matters, the way that I was able to do so many episodes is it's a part of our business. I designed our business, and my other co-founder, Shirag, we designed the business so that 50% of my time is actually spent doing interviews. The other 50% of the time is spent running the company. So in order to do that, we created a business structure of different executives that handle their department so that I could be afforded the opportunity to have that 50% of the time. Another part of this, so getting further into the systems, every author, so you mentioned publishing a book, like every author that we publish, part of their publishing package is we do promotion, they come on the podcast, we do the distribution. So because of that, I literally ingrained, in my opinion, long-term success for our shows, into our business, so that I don't even have to think about it. Like, I don't have to think about where my next guest is coming. It's a book we published. So all those things, like, I try to eliminate as many barriers as possible. So I agree with everything Alex said, for sure. I'm just saying that I just add, to take it one step further, to add to what he said, if you can create systems in your life and in your business that almost guarantee your success if you can stick with them long enough, then each year, like year by year, like not even year, what am I saying? Day by day in this particular business, because you're looking at views, you're looking at audience, you're looking at subscribers, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. I'm not at decade by decade, but you can see growth. So it's just a matter of just continuing to execute after those systems have been created. But if I had to sit back and think, who am I going to interview this week? Or who am I going to, like, oh my gosh, that sounds exhausting. That sounds so exhausting, Emmanuel.
No, absolutely. It absolutely totally does. And I'm listening to that, and I'm thinking, for me, is he said a few things, which is there's a lot of fluff, right? There's a lot of people that believe there's a lot of fluff, like people, oh, I'm gonna wake up and meditate in the morning, which is fine. If it allows you to reduce stress, it totally works. Like for me, my morning routine is I wake up. The first thing I do is I work out. I have a workout equipment I travel with. Work out, then I go straight to work, and I'm researching my guests. And for you, today, all I just did this morning, my work was reading your book. I was like, all right, I'm gonna read the book Driven, and I'm gonna see if I get.
That's why you're in such a good mood.
That's what I'm such now. Yeah, exactly, man. That's exactly.
Had to.
I was reading the book Driven, and by the way, guys, the book is on Kindle. It's free on Kindle. You can check it on. You can check it on. I think I don't know. I paid for it. You can check it on Kindle. You can download the paperback version on Amazon. The link is in the description, guys. So definitely go ahead and go check it out, because I believe there's a lot to learn from what Adam is saying. Now, I'm very curious. This is a very interesting question. Is how do you deal with the stress of business? Like, how do you deal with the stress of if not even your personal life? How do you deal with the stress? Because like you have the legal, you have the marketing, you have all that stuff. How do you deal with the stress and not letting it overwhelm you?
Yeah, that's I'll tell you that I pray a lot. Talk to God a lot, and I always think about it this way. It's like, so I have these conversations, and I'm like, so every rung of revenue, we'll say, whether it's going just to make it like from $1,000 to $10,000 to 100,000 to 1,000,000 to 10, like every rung or every zero or every bit that you ask for, and I believe that I'm asking for these things, like it's kind of like I'm like, all right, God, I did it to myself. I know I asked for this. I stepped, you stepped, and so now I just feel that God's not going to give me anything that I can't handle, and I just look back, and I think Steve Harvey, he does this thing, and it's definitely Steve Harvey. I'm a big Steve Harvey fan, and he'll ask the audience. I've seen him do it in some of his videos, and I think even in person things, and he'll ask the audience, and he'll be like, who in here has had like some really, really hard things that have happened in your life, like really hard? Raise your hand. A lot of people raise their hand. Then he's like, real hard things that you thought you were never going to get through. You thought they were going to kill you. And he's like, then some people, put their hand down a little bit. And then he's like, how many of you never made it through that experience? And he's like, keep your hand up. everybody puts their hand up. They're still there. They're still living. Of course they didn't die. So it's kind of like a way of like, I just affirm myself in understanding that, like, number one, I asked for it. Like, nobody's forcing me to take on all these different like things and these responsibilities. So I have to take some ownership and accountability to that. Number two, I got to pray. I got to learn, and I got to know that I can't control like other people or the situation all the time, but I can be in control of my feelings and my emotions, and I can reaffirm that and understand that, hey, my reaction to the situation is all I can actually control, like in the real world. Even though we like to maybe sometimes feel like we're in control, but we know that's not the case in reality. So those are kind of like the big ones. And then I just have to do that gut check to myself, and I do it pretty often. And I'm like, hey, do I still like want this? Because something that entrepreneurs, like as they get to different levels, should consider is that potential for exit. Right now, you may be building a business that may be to a certain level, and you may feel that like that has to be the rest of your life, or your business for the rest of life, or this or that. And your identity is so tied up into it that you don't really think about even the potential of something else. But I'll just tell you from my perspective, if I'm the last host on the Mission Matters podcast, then that means I didn't fulfill my calling. Like the whole point of this is, how do I empower others? And that's why, and just showing you a very clear and concise example of that, that's why we launched the Mission Matters Podcast Network. So we've been blessed, and now we've also found a way to help other podcasters or aspiring podcasters be trained, be distributed, and we have a whole network. So we have 35 shows that we produce and that we promote, and I think 27 to 28 that are live, and I think there might be like 5 to 7 in production. But again, being blessed and figuring out another way to be a blessing to others. So that's really like how I deal with the pressure, and that's how I deal with the stress of it all, because it's all there. I'm not sugarcoating that. I'm in the media business. It's one of the toughest businesses in the world. That is not easy. There's no glamour in what I do. Like that's what I tell people, whether they believe it or not. There isn't. This is hard work, day in and day out, mind numbing. When I was just starting, I was doing, first couple of years, Emmanuel, I was doing 91 episodes. That's my record in a week.
Damn.
1 week. 2 years of content in a week. My average week in the beginning was between 60 and 75 episodes per week. That's 6 days a week of recording. That's 15, as many as 18-hour recording sessions where I didn't get to go to the bathroom unless somebody canceled. Like that's what it takes, like to do what I felt was my calling. So when you talk about stress, pressure, things like that, it's there. At the end of those days, I did everything that I'm telling you about. But in addition to that, I'd be in the fetal position with an ice pack on my head. That helped too.
No, that's crazy, man. You basically, and you talking about the episodes. That's something even I'm thinking, because I'm thinking, I was like, dude, because I looked at when I saw the 6,000 and I was like, dude, this guy's working, man. This guy is working. And I love it, man. I love that fact. I love the fact. I love the work. I love the grind. As we wrap up right now, I know we have almost 900 people watching here, guys. As we wrap up, what do you what is the message that you have for people? Where can they find you? Or what is that stuff? Any closing words?
So first thing is, like, my point in doing all this, I just want to elaborate, is that I want you to go share your story. Like, okay, yeah, I'm here, I'm promoting a book. Yes, that's a given, right? On entrepreneurship. But my main goal in even doing that is, I hope to inspire others to do the same. Like, write your book, like launch your podcast. My first podcast, sometimes you can see where somebody's at or some other things, and maybe, it maybe seem intimidating, or like, oh my gosh, look at all these different things. But my first podcast, I started it in 10 minutes, and I was so scared that my first person I ever interviewed was the other co-founder. I didn't even do a video interview or anything on video until after 1,500 episodes, because I was so scared to be in front of camera. on my very, very first show, I was so scared I didn't even use my real name. Like I called myself, it was a nickname, Mr. Century City, something that somebody else had given
Mr.
me.
Century City LLC. I love it.
That's where it all came from. I was so scared I didn't even use my own name. My first show was called The Gratitude Show. All I did was sit there and say, what are you grateful for? And that's it. And you tell me what you're grateful for, I'll tell you what I'm grateful for. And that was it. So I'm saying this because we can talk about like where we're at now and all these other things, but that's not what it's about. First podcast episode, 10 minutes to start, was scared, didn't even want to say my own name. Like I was that petrified. So like if you're watching this and you're thinking about doing something, do it. Whether you're doing with a company like ours, you're doing it with whoever, like you set it up, like don't let somebody else or don't let fear hold you back from living and walking in your own calling, because time's ticking whether we want it to or not. So like you need to go through and do whatever you feel your calling is and create content in the way that you feel is appropriate, because the world wants to hear your message. Like my voice is different from Emmanuel's, is different from yours. Like there's people out right there right now that would be more inspired from hearing your voice and your message than anyone on this podcast right now, but they'll never hear that. And that story will go to your grave if you don't start creating the content. So that's my message. In order to connect, to find anything like that, ask Adam Torres everywhere. It's everywhere. So whether it's on Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, name it. Ask Adam Torres. Real simple. You'll find a link there that links to all of our content.
Absolutely love it, man. I think the most important thing that you said there was you kept showing up, and I think that's where most people miss the mark, is that they stop showing up. And it was a phenomenal interview having you on. And guys, like I said, the links in the description to check out Adam's content. Definitely go support his channel. He has a YouTube channel. Go support his YouTube channel. Go, hit him up on Instagram. If you're single and you're in California, definitely go hit him up. He's a man of God there. And absolutely pleasure. It's a pleasure having you on, man. And everybody else, like I said, guys, bye-bye. Everyone have a good day. And thanks again, guys, for joining us in today's live. I will see you guys on the next live. Take care.